Hello, my name is Dr. Cameron Jones and I'm an environmental microbiologist. And today on this live stream, we're actually going to suspend our discussion about all things mold related, mainly due to the fact that the World Health Organization overnight has declared COVID-19 a pandemic. And so today's show is going to focus on some key elements about what we know that certainly I've been researching in the literature in the last couple of weeks. The reason I think it's important that we focus on COVID-19 is that there is a lot of fear and panic happening now. There is a huge amount of very credible science that is being published in the peer-reviewed literature and even the pre-peer-reviewed servers out there. So there is a lot of quality information, and I'm going to encourage everyone to use those resources to inform themselves about the spread of this pandemic, as well as what is emerging in the literature with regard to steps that can be taken, proactive steps that may reduce the infectivity and the transmission rates. In order to start today's show, I'm going to be focusing on something called microbiological literacy. And we're also going to be focusing on COVID-19 awareness. I interviewed a person earlier in the week, Richard Anthony from Eze Training, who has developed a COVID-19 awareness course that is focusing on the tattoo and body arts industries, as well as the broader hospitality sector. So I'll be bringing you that interview a bit later in today's live stream. But the first topic that I want to cover is something called microbiological literacy. And just before we start this, I'm just going to briefly run through the agenda for today's show. It is a little bit late, mainly due to the fact that my phone's been running hot with people commenting and wanting to discuss aspects of infection control with us today. So as I said, we're going to begin by reviewing this topic of microbiological literacy, because really this is a foundation, or it's foundational information to understanding epidemic spreads and the role of viruses and their relationship to bacteria, yeast, and fungi, which is usually the core information that we bring you each week. As I said, I'm then interviewing Richard Anthony from Eze Training, and then we are going to be looking at an update on a paper I discussed a couple of weeks ago as part of our news segment, which was focusing on fractal scaling. Fractal scaling is a way of understanding behaviours that change over time, and the infection rate and death rate of COVID-19 is no different. And so the authors who originally demonstrated that there appeared to be a trail off in the infection levels of COVID-19 in Wuhan, China, have updated their paper, and we're going to be looking at the implications of that. As well, I want to be talking about the role of temperature and humidity on general virus transmission, because this is something that has been discussed in the research literature. In fact, the Nature published a paper back in 1960 talking about the relationship between temperature and relative humidity and absolute humidity. And I'm going to be showing you an important graph which could be of assistance to all of us as we look for practical methods that may reduce the transmission rate of this particular virus throughout the community. And I then want to look at this very red hot topic of conspiracy theories and whether or not there is any evidence to support the claims that have been made, certainly in various social medias, that there is lab engineering of the SARS-CoV virus. So I'm going to debunk that quite up front at the beginning of this episode, and then show you what the academic literature has to say about this. So this issue of microbiological literacy, well, this was really spearheaded by a paper which came out in 2019 in the journal Environmental Microbiology. And the whole purpose of this paper was to introduce into the dialogue that we need to be considering these other areas of biology and making microbiological literacy a core component of the educational curriculum, and so that people are more aware about the biological underpinnings of how they affect our world. And I'm going to just give you a helicopter overview of what this paper says. And essentially, we need to recognize that human beings are essentially 50% microbial. We have something called a microbiome in our intestinal system, our gut system, which is talked about all the time recently in the last couple of years. And the various different bacteria, yeasts, and fungi make up a large part of the organization of us as humans. And there is also something called a biome as well, which is the viral component to the biomes that are not just in our gut, but we also have a biome and a microbiome in our homes as well. And I often talk about the relationship between us as occupants and the built environment, and how the external weather conditions impact on our home and, of course, on our own microflora present inside our bodies. So the take-home message is that we may be human, but we're also 50% microbial, and there are a lot of different, therefore, organizational systems within us which impact on our systems. We also need to understand that communities of microorganisms essentially create second skins, and these microbes are present on pretty much all our surfaces, and they are an interface between us as we interact with our environment. Plant-associated microorganisms are absolutely fundamental and essential for growth, and without plants, obviously, we wouldn't have nutrients for other animals, and so this cycle of biology is all interrelated with the microbes as well. And as well, microorganisms are proactively protective for many animals, and of course, they need these microorganisms in order for them to ferment and digest foods as well. So there is a big cycle around the interplay that is usually just considered as biology, but we need to drill down into this and recognize that it is really microbiology, and there are a lot of elements here which are very important to understand. And so the key takeaway here is that a biome is quite a complex phenomena, and it is really the interrelationship between us and the microorganisms that are in our natural world. And I do want to say at this point that viruses are not microorganisms. They are related in the sense that they are microscopic and they replicate within living cells, but they are not microorganisms, but they do fall into the category of what is studied within the domain of microbiology, and specifically in the discipline area of virology. In any case, I said to you that I have a special guest on today. I'm going to play this interview for you now. It's with Richard Anthony, who is the CEO of Eze Training Courses.com. He's developed a COVID-19 awareness course. Specifically, he is going to be delivering this to the body arts industries, the tattoo industry, as part of the infection control training that he already does, as well as to the hospitality sector and to other individuals who are interested in learning more specific information than can be found in the public domain. He too is going to be drawing a lot of resources and individuals together to deliver really quite topical information, and as I said, information which is domain specific to some of these areas in society, such as body art. So I'm excited to bring that to you now, and we will play this. I recorded this yesterday, and all the links to EasyTrainingCourses.com and to Richard are available. I understand that the course is coming online very soon, so I will play that to you now. Hi, Richard. Thanks for joining me today. I wanted to talk to you and do an interview with you because I understand that you're doing something very interesting with regard to the COVID-19 influenza and with training. So, firstly, for people who don't know you, could you tell me a little bit about who you are?
Yep. And thanks for having me as well. I've been involved in the RTO space, mainly in education, for the last probably 15 years. I run a training organisation specifically on boutique courses for the body art and beauty industry, and work with local government regards to training specifically more on infection control. So my background is more infection control. I kind of fell into it,
Okay.
but I've got just a passion for infection control um, and in sterilisation. So I happen to love delivering these particular courses in this subject matter. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I understand too that you're involved in obviously the art of tattooing and how tattooing has moved beyond being a
Yep.
purely decorative method into the
Yep.
beauty arena of tattooing. So I would
Yep. Yep.
imagine that there is a requirement for very careful infection control and autoclaving and sterilization. So I guess that's quite similar to what we're talking about today about contagion, because this
Yep.
transmission of viruses, although they are require a host to live and grow in, it's not too
Yep.
dissimilar to the transmission pathways for our more common microbes like the bacteria, yeast, and
Yep. Yep.
fungi. So, is that sort
Yep.
of your motivation to do this?
Definitely, and I think if you look at just in all industries, not just the beauty industry, we're all very lax when it comes to basic infection control practice, like washing hands. And a lot of people don't understand the word cross contamination. They
Yeah,
think because you're wearing gloves, it's okay to wear gloves and apron and all the PPE gear, but they just don't know what it's actually used for. So most of the time, they're protecting themselves by putting their clients at risk at most times. So it's more about how to wear this stuff and how to utilize it properly.
that's very interesting. And you mentioned
Yeah.
Easy Training is a RTO. So
Yep.
obviously,
Yep.
if anyone jumps onto your website, they can see a whole range of different courses. But this one
Yep.
that we're
Definitely.
talking about today is very specific and focusing
Yep.
on the influenza or COVID-19. Um,
Yep.
in a sense, do you see that as a new development in the RTO space?
I look. I haven't really heard of anyone else doing something like this. This is a specific course mainly for the public, to
Okay.
help people understand this particular bacteria and this virus. Um, and and it's probably for more of a tick and flick for employers, for their employees to understand it, not just say, oh yeah, I'll wash my hands. This way they actually do a course
Yes.
that gives them a certificate, and then the employers know they've done it, and understand that this actual virus really well.
Well, that certainly makes
Because
sense.
yeah, so I think it's more about the employer, and it's about more people covering their bums, really,
Okay.
and understanding this virus and how they can help each other and help themselves.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, public health is all about education and then people making
Yep.
active steps to embody the principles that they might have been told.
Yep.
And this is important.
Yep.
This is critically important now more than ever. Uh, I
Yep.
think that the speed with which the COVID-19 infection rates are occurring around the world is very alarming. And I think
Yep.
too that the analogies that are being made with classic influenza are severely underquoting and underplaying the potential impact of
Yep.
this infection. I
Yep.
guess when we think of classrooms, we think of actually people turning up to a location and sitting on seats and essentially being lectured to.
Yep.
What are you doing with different modalities of course delivery?
Well, I think we're going to be focusing more on online delivery. A lot of our courses are online, and
Okay.
then looking at our face to face time. And because of some of the stuff is hands on, so it's really hard to with this what's going on at the moment. It's really hard to deliver that side of it, because it is a practical side that they need to understand, especially using autoclaves and all that kind of thing. But but saying that, we have got a range of courses that are online and easy for people to do while they are in quarantine mode, if so,
Oh, yeah, look, I'm sure that that's going to be a very significant reality for many people after they stop watching
Yep,
Netflix and reading books and that
yep,
sort of thing. People are
yep,
probably going to attempt to use the time for
yep,
something other
yep,
than scrolling through social media. So I can imagine that
yep,
education is going to be maybe a positive outcome of any type of
yep,
self-quarantine that people may
yep,
have to abide by. I guess
yep.
now, with specific reference to the infection control surrounding COVID-19, when do you anticipate that this course is going to become available?
Well, we're hoping to have it ready by early next week, or end
Wow.
of this week, early next week. So it's looking really good at the moment. And look, a lot of the information is information that's out there, but just put in one spot and delivered very simply and very easy for people to understand. You know,
That makes
so
sense.
a lot of good video, yeah, a lot of video content, just basic stuff from teaching people how to wash their hands properly.
Sure.
You know, than people saying it or writing there you need to wash your hands or stating that through the media, because you're getting all these every channel you put to it, there's something going on in all the media through radio and TV. And so I think people are getting all of these mixed messages. So this is just really simplified things to make it easy for people to understand, to help them protect themselves and their families and their work colleagues and things like that.
Richard, that's very well put. It's certainly of a
Yeah,
concern to me too that the media education is, in a sense, soundbite education. So it's well-meaning and
yeah,
well-intentioned. It's certainly flag
yeah,
falls that element needs to be considered by the public. But how you
yeah,
actually implement that beyond the 1, 2, or 3 minute style content that we see on our news
yeah,
channels, that's really the
yeah,
key question, because people need to
yeah,
know practically how they can protect themselves, care for their
yeah,
families, and
yeah,
not spread more misinformation.
definitely. Yeah, 100%.
Now, I know that you participate in a lot of roundtables and educational forums and practical meetings with a lot of councils
Yeah,
surrounding
yeah.
environmental health. Could you tell me a little bit about where you see the role of the environmental health officers, whether that's mandated currently by their local
Yeah.
councils or whether the individuals concerned are just even thinking about this? Where do you sort of see that whole council-based education coming into play?
Yeah, well, I think, see, the council side of it is quite tough for them because they're all limited budgets these council have, and a lot of the environment health officers are not just focusing on skin pen, but they're focusing on the food, then mosquito outbreaks, and so on and so on. They have
Yep.
to look after a lot of different aspects of their role. So I find it when they're actually focusing on skin pen, and they don't really understand a lot of it because they don't have that much experience. So I've
Okay.
been doing some training, in-house training with them, to helping them understand how to use autoclaves and sterilizers, and to understand the infection control practice and really look at the cross contamination that happens within a lot of these skin pen businesses within the beauty and the cosmetic and the body art industries.
Well, look, that's
Um,
really important, because certainly what we're seeing for the epidemiology of COVID-19 transmission, that it
yeah,
appears to be much more of an infection risk for older persons.
yeah,
And I would imagine that the demographic for, the demographic for one part of the tattooing industry is probably going to be more youth focused, at least
yeah,
in marketing
yeah,
perspective. And so there could
yeah,
be an element of individuals thinking, well, look, it's not going to happen to me. Um,
yeah,
but I can imagine that you're very well aware of people of all
yeah.
ages getting tattoos for a range of reasons apart from just decorative.
Definitely, yeah, 100%. And I think, look, looking at the young people can still be a carrier and
Yeah,
still pass it on to a bit older, and that's the
absolutely.
risk. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of the younger people are thinking, you know what, I'm young, it's fine. They're only mainly for people from 65 up. No, but you could be the carrier and pass it on to someone in your family or a neighbor or a friend, or a client maybe, without
Absolutely. And I guess that's the great positive of a course like yours, is that in a
Yep.
sense you are targeting a particular demographic, which
Yep.
is going to be beneficial just due to the fact that it's targeted.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. 100%.
Yeah, that's very
So and I'm really
exciting.
excited.
Look,
Yeah.
I bet you are, because I
Yeah.
guess people have been saying to me as a microbiologist, you seem very despondent about some of the data, and conversely, you seem quite excited by some of the
Yeah.
papers that I've been reading. And
Yeah.
realistically, there are elements of validation of a lot of the modelling that has been done for years
Mm.
about virus transmission that is now
Yeah.
playing out on the world stage, which is definitely
Yeah.
terrifying. And I'm extraordinarily empathetic about what this means on a
Yeah.
person-to-person basis. But the reality is
Yeah.
that we do need to be discussing some of the fundamental issues about infection control. And
Yeah.
now is a wonderful time to do this. And if you can reach a high percentage of a very significant demographic, including all the people who require or want cosmetic tattooing. This is a wonderful thing that you're doing for public health, Richard.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And we're going to be even passing on to the hospitality industry. So I'm going to be talking to key hotel groups about this course to pass it on to their actual staff.
Listen,
Because
that's
that's
important.
massive, massive. Yeah.
Wow.
So anyone dealing with tourists, anyone coming in, I think this is a really good opportunity for them. A
Well, certainly
good
people have
course for
been
them to do.
saying to me that once people start getting better like this, looking like they're getting better in China, well, then that means that it's over
Yeah.
for that country. And I think that people are
Yeah.
mistaking the fact that virus transmission goes in waves.
Oh,
And
definitely. Yeah.
this means that even if a particular geographical region is less susceptible in the near term or now, it doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
mean that they will be not at risk at some point in time. So
Yeah.
the educational messages do need to get out there. And I guess with an online course, you have the ability to continually update that and change it, don't you?
Definitely. And we can update, change it, we can evolve with new information. And the good thing about this course being online, we can market it to the world. So
Sure.
anyone can do this course,
That's a very good idea.
So
Look,
it's
it
good.
sounds like the
Yeah.
course will be uh, uh, easier to complete in the now rather than maybe even
Yeah,
3 or 4
definitely.
months from when we know even more.
100%. Yeah, this needs to be done right now. I wish I could have it live right now.
Now, where
So,
can people follow up with you specifically, and
yeah.
then with your RTO, your company?
Well, they can go to our Facebook page, which is just Eze Training, Eze Training, and they could follow us there, as well as we've got a Facebook page called Infection Control Expert, where we're going to actually be putting a link there to directly to get into this course. So, which is going to be good. It's going to be a very low price course as well, so it's going to be very affordable.
Oh, that's important too. So
Yeah,
that's really, really good to know. Listen, Richard, thank you for telling me all about what you're doing to proactively add to the educational content and dialogue that's going on in
yeah,
Australia. I know that the government is currently planning on providing some timely information on this, which I'm sure you're going to absorb into your course as well. I
yeah,
think that the academic literature is moving so quickly. I'm
yeah,
very pleased to see that the majority of the open source and peer-reviewed journal publishers are making their content accessible and not
yeah,
behind paywalls. So this does mean that the dissemination of accurate information is more likely to diffuse into the community. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the messaging that people like you undertake
yeah,
to take this
yeah,
information to the community. Otherwise, we
yeah.
will be left with soundbite type education, which also won't
Oh,
be a
definitely.
great thing.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I agree totally.
Wonderful. Listen, Richard, thank you
Yeah.
for your time this morning.
No
And
worries. Thanks for having me.
I will be playing this or broadcasting this tomorrow. So I
Yeah.
hope to have this out around about certainly before midday tomorrow on
Yeah,
our
cool.
website. on Facebook,
Yeah,
and then
fantastic.
later it'll be on YouTube. So I wish you well, and
Excellent.
you've got a lot of work ahead of you, and
Yeah,
stay well and safe. And I'll look forward to undertaking the course myself.
yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Cameron. I really appreciate your help, mate.
Okay, bye for now. See ya. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, we just heard from Richard Anthony, so check that course out and look in the show notes for all the links to that. I now want to review something quite important. Now, this is not really a scary looking slide that I've put up on screen, and for those of you who are listening to the podcast, I'm going to describe what is being shown here. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking about a publication that appeared in the literature, which was talking about something called fractal kinetics. Fractals are really just a way of describing phenomena that scale at different levels. And what that means in plain English, think of a tree or your vascular system. All of these are built from repeating units. So the mathematics of fractal scaling is a beautiful discipline in its own right. But in many cases, there is a way of mapping or plotting phenomena and then looking for something called power laws. And power laws basically mean that you have behaviors that track through at different scales. And so just think of different scales along the x-axis in a sense, from 0 to 10, from 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000 and 100,000. You can plot phenomena on what are called double logarithmic axes and look for something called power laws. And when you find evidence of power laws, that means that there is a strong connection within the system, and in a sense, it is tightly bound to itself. And so, defining and being able to identify evidence of power law gives you some ability in some cases to make predictions. And so a paper that came out a couple of weeks was talking about this, but this first slide is focusing on something called exponential growth. And in order to look for power laws, we first need to understand what exponential growth is. And in the top left-hand side of this slide, I'm focusing on a classic example of exponential growth. And basically, you can see that over time, you have an increase in the graph or the curve. And so when we plot out the total confirmed COVID-19 cases outside of China, we see that not only do we see exponential growth, but the red markings on the exponential growth chart for the total confirmed cases shows the doubling time. So essentially, this is a doubling of the number of cases that are appearing. And similarly, death rate is also showing evidence of exponential growth. But moving on to why this is a fractal or a scaling phenomena, when you replot those curves on what are called log-log axes, basically you can see that you're seeing straight line phenomena. And in these authors who put this paper up on the preprint server a couple of weeks ago have just updated it. And this is very important. On the 1st of March, they updated this. And again, in their earlier paper, they were suggesting that there was a trail off in the upper right-hand side of the curve, meaning that they thought their conclusion was that there was a trail off in the infection level in China. But unfortunately, it has continued. They've continued to plot out the curve, and even though we are being told in the media that the infection levels are definitely falling, certainly as of the early March 2020, there's really no clear evidence of this falling off significantly. and the deaths in China are definitely following this power law phenomena, which is incredibly concerning. But again, the mathematical modeling of this is also important because it does give us early warning indicators that can be applied in the presentation of information for other countries. In any case, I now want to move on to something a little bit more positive. Again, there have been some very interesting studies looking at the relationship between temperature and humidity and the ability of viruses to spread, that is their infectivity level, but also are there any take-home messages about temperature and humidity that we can use practically to, in a sense, understand or maybe even control or limit the spread of viruses? And there is great literature just beginning to emerge with specific focus on COVID-19. A lot of this work has been done on other influenza and other SARS and COVID viruses. So what I'm presenting up here on the screen is a paper which came out a couple of years ago in 2014, which was looking at the relationship between humidity and respiratory virus transmission. And what they basically found is in this graph, they're summarizing three separate papers. And basically the curves show a U-shaped pattern. And what this is quite interesting and quite important because, as I said, there is some research just beginning to emerge specific to COVID-19, looking like this U-shaped pattern may in fact extend to COVID-19. And if it does, that means that there is a relationship between relative humidity. And again, as part of this live stream, I can't get into all the specifics about the connection between relative humidity and absolute humidity. Relative humidity is dependent on temperature, is related to the amount of water vapor at specific temperatures, whereas absolute humidity really is an absolute measure of the amount of water, and that's has different units again than relative humidity is usually reflected as a percentage. So we'll just stick with relative humidity for the time being. But you can see on the curve that there is this U-shaped pattern. And essentially what this means is that viruses survive at quite a low level when relative humidity is maintained at 50 to 60%. And I have used a red box to emphasize this U-shaped area and focus your attention on the fact that at 50% relative humidity, you have quite low virus survival. And you can see that at the outside margins of the U, at low relative humidity, right up to 40%, you've got a very high percentage of virus being recovered. And similarly, at very high relative humidities, certainly above 70, you're getting comparatively high levels of virus recovery as well. And when we talk about virus recovery, that means that when these experiments were run, the virus was able to be recovered and continue to grow. And so I think that that is something fundamental that we're going to see a lot more discussion about the relationship between temperature and humidity, and how this can possibly be proactively maintained in the built environment to reduce the transmission rates. Time will tell, and we'll see a lot more research that will come out about this topic, I'm sure. Now, conspiracy theories. All of us from time to time probably think, what if questions? Was this an introduced virus? Could there have been foul play? What does the research literature say? Well, a very interesting paper came out again in 2020 in Emerging Microbes and Infections journal. And basically this concept of speculations, rumors, and conspiracy theories have certainly put forward in the social media domain and you know, even in interpersonal conversations about this, the what if questions. Was it of laboratory origin? Well, In a sense, the foundation for this linked back to a paper which appeared on a preprint archive server, and there was some claim that SARS had an HIV sequence in it. Now, when the information in this non-peer-reviewed paper was scrutinized more carefully by other scientists, the actual first authors withdrew the paper, and the conclusion made in this most recent 2020 paper is that it is much more likely that SARS-CoV-2 is a recombinant COVID virus generated in nature between a bat COVID virus and another coronavirus in an intermediate animal host. So that's what we know to date. And at this point in time, all we can say is that it is an emergent virus. All we have to go on is what is in the peer-reviewed literature. The origin of this virus, I'm sure, is going to be debated for a long period to come. But now that we are in pandemic conditions, it certainly would behoove all of us to educate ourselves as well as we can using public domain sources and course availability. There is a lot of free information out there. The peer-reviewed literature and the preprint servers, as I said at the beginning of this live stream, are generating a huge volume of literature, most of which is accessible, and that's a really good thing. At the end of the day, we need education to inform us about not only the risks, but also intervention strategies which could assist. In any case, next week I hope to get back to a more mould and fungus related live stream. But I thought today it was necessary to focus on COVID-19. In any case, I wish everyone well, and I will look forward to being back next week with a new live stream. Anyway, see you later. Bye for now.